But today, it's the south of France, and that's me in the passenger seat.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make an announcement. I hate Timo Solonen.
And I don't believe. I am sure that you like.
Oh, don't, I hate you.
For me, it is very nice. For me, it is very relaxing.
Would you like me to show you what I had for breakfast?
Oh, it's very relaxed for me to play with the car.
It's not relaxing at all.
Yeah.
Girls have been going shopping in.
No.
Yes, they are.
You must look the countryside also.
You go shopping in cars, you go out to the cinema in a car, you don't...
No, but this car for to look the countryside.
I've actually been on the Paris-Dakar Rally, as a spectator of course. I've seen the cars do this kind of thing in this kind of terrain. But until I actually went in one of them, felt what it was like, I don't think I really understood quite what was involved. I do now though.
Oh, I want to kill you, Mr. Sullivan. Oh, God. I'm going to be sick. You do this 500 miles?
Yeah.
Without a break?
Yeah.
Well, you must be mad. You're criminally insane. I'm going to report you to the police. Get out. This guy is mad. He's certifiable. He's quite mad, you know. You shouldn't be working with him. You should be in prison. Anyway, my turn. Oh, God. Well, this is comfortable.
It wasn't actually. In fact, I had to use the spare car, which was more spacious. So my body was all right, but my heart sounded like a tumble dryer full of half bricks.
Right.
Okay.
Right, here we go. Oh. I say the ride's not bad. Oh, changed my mind. Oh, la.
I feel like my mother is driving.
Oh,
You
thanks
have
a
a little
lot.
bit same driving style.
Thank you very much, Timo.
They say that the Paris-Dakar Rally is really only for old men, people who are too ancient and arthritic to take part in proper World Rally Championships. But don't you believe it?
This car is incredibly fast.
Yeah. This car is for men, not for boys.
Oh, well, I'm a boy, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I can feel a little bit like that. Okay, but no problem. You managed that corner very well. You will learn.
Ow, my fault! Oh, I've got it. Ow!
Okay.
Now, how on earth do you cope with that sort of thing?
No, it's planned that you don't think nothing else, only driving.
How can you think I'm not driving when the seatbelt is ruining your manhood?
No, it's no problem.
It is a problem!
No, for me anyway, I have no more.
Oh, I could do that all day.
Yeah, but I prefer to go to spectating outside.
Thank you for your vote of confidence, Timo. Now, of course, the guys who drive these things across the desert for hundreds of miles need to take with them cool boxes, their teddies, pyjamas, tents, that kind of thing. So, really, it needs to be more than simply 2 seats, a fuel tank, and an engine. Which, as you can see, it isn't. The service manual you have to read before you can work on that is called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the chief mechanic in the Citroën team, he's called Jules Verne. Now, they have been very kind, I must say. They've said I can have one last thrash.
car from the past arrives at a building of the future. The Heritage Motor Centre at Gaydon, just south of Birmingham, which opened last May and houses the world's largest selection of British cars. All kinds of mechanical marvels housed within a dramatic semicircular Art Deco building where you can cast your eye over all sorts of motoring memorabilia. Essentially, the Heritage Motor Centre is all about British motoring history, and in particular, the pedigree and background to the current Rover Group. This is the oldest car with an established British name. It's an 1896 Wolseley Tri-Car. It was actually built by Herbert Austin before he made cars under his own name when he was general manager of the Wolseley Sheep Shearing Company in Birmingham. Wolseleys was soon joined by Morrises and Austins, and these two famous British makes are very much part of my own motoring heritage. This 1934 Austin 7 Ruby is of the type that transported the entire Needell family to the motor racing at Goodwood in the 1950s. Bought second-hand for £10 and then discarded when they break down. We went through 3 of them before moving up market to the Austin A30 and then the Morris 1000. I passed my test in one of these. In fact, much of the fun of the Heritage Motor Centre is to browse through your own motoring memoirs, to show your children the old cars you once treasured and the cars that created motorsport history. Now, believe it or not, this is where Rover started, with an 1886 Sutton and Starley bicycle with the trademark Rover. Since then, Rover has been just one of the many makes that have created our British motoring heritage. And at Gaydon, a real plus is that you can get so close to the exhibits that you can get a real feel for the smell and character of the machines. You can dream of caravanning in the 30s, complete with all mod cons, and visiting your local garage for a quick service. Here's a car I raced myself back in 1978. It's a Unipart Formula 3 car powered by a Triumph Dolomite Sprint engine. Now, when I moved up to Formula 1 in 1979, this seat was taken by a young Nigel Mansell. To really enjoy any museum, you do need to use a certain amount of imagination. To imagine what it must have been like to drive some of these wonderful cars. To imagine what it must be like to drive the 1908 Austin Grand Prix car. Now, Austin is a name that's hardly famous in Grand Prix racing. That's not surprising, because this is the only model they ever made. They made 4 of them for the 1908 French Grand Prix. 2 of them did finish, but they weren't competitive and the project was scrapped. Now, this is the only model still in existence. The 10-litre straight-six engine gives about 100 horsepower, and that's plenty when you haven't got any brakes. And it's not just brakes you lack as you sit out in the open, unprotected from the elements, picking the flies out of your teeth and praying it won't rain. Well, that's difficult to stop. It's fairly easy to get the Austin going. Changing gear means double D-clutching, going both up and down the 4-speed gearbox. The Austin may not have been the most successful car in Grand Prix history, but it was a thrill to be allowed to relive the experiences of the great motoring pioneers. From 1908 to 1927, from looking like Toad of Toad Hall to feeling like him, heading for a bash in the country in the decadent 20s aboard a Leyland 8 Thomas Special, Britain's first straight 8. Built by truck makers Leyland, it's a huge beast that had no future on the narrow lanes of Britain. Designed by land speed record breaker Parry Thomas, the Leyland was great for travelling in a straight line, but corners, forget it. Now this is something else. gas turbine power for cars, an area where Rover led the world, building 3 road-going prototypes and this Le Mans Special, built by BRM and driven by Graham Hill and Jackie Stewart back in 1965.
Just checking the dials now, my engine speed is 50,000 RPM. I've got a jet temperature of 600 degrees centigrade. At the moment we're just cruising a fairly nice 50 miles an hour. The thought of doing the Le Mans 24-hour race with this amount of heat behind me is not what I'd really fancy. I feel like Yuri Gagarin on the first ever rocket trip around the world. Not too sure of things. At least it shuts down nice and gently.
The biggest motoring event of next week is the London Motor Show at Earl's Court. We'll be there with all the most drool-worthy new models. And we've been out filming some of them too, like the long-awaited AC Ace, a Cosworth-powered roller skate from Westfield, and, is it different? A new Porsche 911. All in next week's Top Gear.
In 1963, a high-tech factory was opened at Linwood in Scotland to manufacture an exciting new vehicle. The circumstances were somewhat unusual. The workforce was largely composed of ex-shipbuilders, the engine was based on an old fire pump, and the car was launched before it had been properly tested. Unpromising beginnings, but the little car duly emerged from the factory to greet an unsuspecting public. Perhaps they knew no better, as some less discerning drivers actually quite liked the Hillman Imp. And 30 years later, it still has its aficionados. So much so that 500 of them recently turned up at Helmsley in North Yorkshire for the Imp's 30th birthday bash. This must be one of the last cars to have a starting handle, but the bizarre thing was, it didn't come with the car. You had to write to the Roots Group in Coventry and buy one, which does seem to defeat the object somewhat. Mind you, starting the engine was the least of your worries. Lying on its side in the back of the car, it produced an array of baffling problems.
Water pumps would fail. This would lead to the car overheating. Because the engine's all aluminium, when it overheats, the head tends to warp. And that's where the problems really start, because the mechanics of the day, really in their ignorance, they weren't familiar with aluminium engines, and they just used to strip threads. So the damage was done in the process of fixing them. Really.
When did you get hooked on Imps?
I got my first car in 1980 after my O-levels, and never looked back since. There was actually a period of about 2 months in 1989, I think, when I didn't own one. I've had 3 ever since.
You don't ever get anybody sort of saying, well, haven't you got a proper car?
Almost daily. We do have a modern car, but this is the one I drive regularly. I much prefer it.
Of course, mechanical problems weren't the only worry that faced Imp owners. There were 1 or 2 peculiarities in the all-important area of handling, as I shall try and demonstrate. Not for nothing do the organisers call this little exercise the skills test. Now, one of the problems of handling was that on a wet or a greasy road or something, if you started to turn the corner, turn the wheel, put your brakes on, this is what happened. Fortunately, that wasn't a telegraph pole. Somewhat surprisingly, given the Imp's aversion to corners and a tendency to spin at the slightest provocation, the car performed remarkably well in international rallying. Never better than in the hands of Dublin dress designer Rosemary Smith, who won the prestigious Tulip Rally, no less. Rosemary, how difficult was the Imp to drive?
At the time, they seemed very difficult. They were a bit tail-happy, as you can imagine, with the weight in the back of them. But when you get used to them, I honestly think it's like any car. It doesn't matter what it is, you've got to get used to them. I found them great. And in fact, you know, I still find them great. I take them out sometimes in historic stuff, and they're a super strong little car.
Do you think that the rally success of the Imp helped in its sales?
Yes, to a certain degree, but unfortunately the road models weren't as good as the rally models, obviously, and they got a bit of a bad name, and I think that's why eventually they just sort of petered out altogether. They weren't very reliable as a road car.
Whichever way you look at it, for a small car, the Imp had some pretty big problems. So where's its appeal?
Very fast, very nippy.
For me, it's something like heaven to come here to England and see all these hundreds of Impsters here.
There was one round our road when I was quite young. I used to go out on my bike and stare at it, and that's how I sort of cottoned onto them.
They've done it! These Imp enthusiasts have finally converted me, so much so that I've decided to go home in one.
I just wanted
In just
to
a
say
few
how
moments,
pleased
this young man is going to be given £18,000 to spend on a company car.
And to mark that, we're going to offer you £18,000 to buy a company car of your choice.
He is now behaving in exactly the same way as pretty well every other thrusting young executive who gets his wheels on the firm. In essence, he is engaged in a headlong rush to the nearest BMW dealer, from which he will emerge in a shiny new 318i. His mates are impressed with his new car, his boss is happy, he is happy.
So, that's it then. Except for one small thing. He, like thousands of others, never stopped to consider if there might be an alternative. And that meant he never stopped to consider the brand new C-Class Mercedes-Benz. This is a replacement for the 190. It's bigger, and of course it's better. And at £17,600, it's just about the same as a BMW 318i. The question is it any good?
The only way you can work that out is to do what 50% of BMW buyers don't do and go for a test drive. The first thing that will put our young friend off the Mercedes is the styling. From most angles it looks as statesmanlike and as dignified as all the other Mercedes-Benzes, but from the back it's just plain ugly, even, dare I say it, a little Vauxhall Belmont-ish.
He also won't care very much for the interior. He won't like this huge plastic steering wheel, and he won't like the ridiculously hard and unsupportive seats that he falls out of every time he goes around the corner. He won't like the acres of black plastic, which on the more expensive models are where you find all the knobs and buttons. He won't like the lack of a sunroof, and he'll be completely baffled by these strange windy things in the doors. Apparently you turn them and the windows go up and down. Might catch on, that.
This must be the most expensive car you can buy that does not have electric windows as standard. But most of all, our young friend won't like the performance. Under that huge bonnet there's a 1.8-litre four-cylinder engine, which develops exactly the same amount of power as an egg whisk. Top speed is 120 miles an hour. With an automatic gearbox, 0 to 60 takes 14 seconds. Oak trees grow faster than that.
If Mercedes were gunning for the swooping young BMW driving ad man, then they have failed comprehensively and miserably. But I don't think they were. In order to find out what this car is all about, we need to go right back to the beginning and start again.
This is the old Mercedes 190. It was the car that brought Mercedes ownership within the reach of millions, and millions of people responded by buying one. The 190 is a tough act to follow, and to make sure they got its replacement right, Mercedes have been working on it for 10 years. This is the result, the C-Class, one of the most thoroughly designed cars that you can buy.
Most car-related advertising slogans are claptrap, but this really is engineered like no other car.
And that badge way down there at the end of the bonnet serves as a constant reminder that life is treating you well. According to a recent European survey, a Mercedes is the most prestigious car on the market.
And then there's the interior. No, it isn't very well equipped, but what you do get is beautifully screwed together. Every switch, every knob feels like it will last for 100 years.
Buy this car when you retire and it will still be in perfect working order until way past your sell-by date. It is a slow car, but it's fast enough. It will cruise effortlessly at 70 miles an hour with not a hint of wind noise, just the gentle sound of Radio 2 to keep you awake. It won't break the bank either. It will return 28 mpg on average, and after 3 years and 40,000 miles, it will only have lost 45% of the initial purchase price. A C-Class may be expensive to buy, but in the long term, it could actually work out cheaper to run than a Ford. Handling tends not to be of great importance to the older buyer, which is a good thing because the C-Class isn't very good at it. It rides beautifully though. It's as comfortable as having a bath.
And then there's the immense feeling of solidity. I know this is a real Clarksonism, but if I had to have an accident in a car costing less than £20,000, I'd choose this one. Sure, you don't get a sunshine roof or electric windows, but you do get an airbag and anti-lock brakes. And these are sensible features because this is a sensible car for sensible, practical, proper people.
So, to sum up, what we have here is a car that's too slow, too staid and too boring for younger motorists. And the faster, better equipped versions are too expensive.
However, what we have here is a car that's just about perfect for people with greying temples, for people who are old enough to remember Janis Joplin and that immortal line, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes?"
If, like Mr. Clarkson, you take exception to having to wind your windows down by hand, then you'll have to recourse to the options list. Personalising your new car with a litany of factory-fitted extras, options and fripperies might seem like a good idea, but one thing's certain, they ain't cheap. Take this BMW 520i Touring. In the brochures it has a list price of £21,800. But how about some horny-looking alloys, a cool £1,100, a hole in the roof, £1,020. That most essential of essential accessories, rear luggage nets, will cost you a jaw-dropping 190 quid. Or you can have your gear lever knob and steering wheel trimmed in leather for a questionable £100. In fact, you could spend the thick end of 19,000 if you specified everything on BMW's options list. That way, the cheque you'd have to sign would be over 40 grand, nearly double the original price. But 2 years down the line, come part exchange time, and your not inconsiderable investment would only be worth a tiny fraction of what you'd paid. So, for those of you who think that fully loaded second-hand cars are worth plenty, it's time to think again.
Options on used vehicles are normally worth between 10 and 15% after 2 to 3 years of the original price you paid for them on the car. Alloy wheels can be valued at £1,200 new, and they're probably worth about £150, £200 when you bring the car back in. It's a little bit similar to when you buy a new house. You'll put a new kitchen in, a new bathroom, and all the pieces you want. When you come to sell the house, the next purchaser obviously won't want to give you a large market value for the items which they didn't buy originally.
Here at the anvil of the used car market, the car auction, this is where options find their true value. And the story is not a simple one. Take this Jaguar, for instance. Some prestige cars can become wallflowers on the used car market if they haven't got the right options. A Jag with cloth trim just isn't a Jag. Used Jag buyers prefer to rest their rumps on leather, although mercifully this one does have the automatic gearbox. This, on the other hand, has the hide, but it's a manual. Bad news. Aspirant executives like their cogs shifted for them. But that doesn't hold true for mainstream family cars. Ordering an automatic gearbox and leather trim on your 405 or Cavalier will leave prospective buyers unmoved when you come to sell. In fact, used automatic Cavaliers and Mondeos are actually worth less than their manual counterparts, and options on popular cars still cost plenty.
£850 blesses your Mondeo gear with a CD player. £1,000 means you can sit on leather, but when you come to sell, that lot will only be worth a couple of £100 or so. You'll be stuffing even more money down the drain if you specify heated front seats. The promise of a warm bottom on a cold winter morning won't cut much ice with used buyers. They have different priorities.
According to a survey published by the ADT Auction Group, only 17% of used car buyers are impressed by luxury add-ons. They're more interested in environmental friendliness, insurance, performance and safety, and even more concerned with economy.
So the brutal truth of the matter is, options aren't all they're cracked up to be. You'll never get back what you paid. But for the hedonists among you who like life's little luxuries but would rather not commit financial harry-carry, I have the answer, and it's blissfully simple. Buy a fully loaded used car instead. That way, some other bloke foots the bill.
New metallic paint was £622, rear electric windows £369, outside temperature gauge £127, and a front centre armrest £135, total £1,250.
And here, under the hammer, that little lot's worth maybe £300. The option, if you'll pardon the pun, is yours.
Next week, there's that full report from the London Motor Show, including a road test of the new, slightly smaller Lexus. And there's even more Motor Show in our special programme the following Sunday on BBC One.